Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. And I want to mention we're joined by Council Members Cornegy, Powers, and Levine, and more Council members should be on their way. On today's stated agenda, the Council will be voting on the following land use item: 6003 8th Avenue rezoning in Councilmember Carlos Menchaca's district. It's a zoning map amendment to bring an existing 3-story commercial building into conformance. Out of the Council's Finance Committee, we're going to vote on 8 Article 11 property tax exemptions in Councilmember Ayala, Perkins, Cabrera, and Salamanca's district. Collectively, these exemptions will preserve the affordability of just over 1,000 units of housing. Moving on, the Council will be voting on the following pieces of legislation. First, we have a piece of housing and buildings legislation from our Housing and Buildings Chair, Robert Cornegy. Introduction 1661A would require permit holders to make information about site safety training requirements available to each worker during site safety orientations and periodic site safety refreshers. This information would need to be available in each of the designated citywide languages and any other languages required by the Department of Buildings. This bill also contains a technical amendment to introduction number 720, which passed the Council at our last stated meeting, and I invite Councilmember Cornegy to come up and speak on his bill.
Thank you, Speaker Johnson. I ask you to please bear with me while I try to reduce my carbon footprint by using technology instead of paper. So here we go. I'm Councilmember Robert Cornegy, representing the vibrant communities of Bed-Stuy and Northern Crown Heights. I also serve as the chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings. I'm looking forward to passing an important construction safety bill today that I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on. My bill, Intro 1661A, addresses the ongoing concerns that the diverse construction workforce of our city is not adequately informed about site safety and its training requirements mandated by Local Law 196 in 2017. New York City is the most diverse city on the face of the planet and continues to be built by people from all over the world. In an effort to enhance and bolster construction site safety for both workers and the public, we should ensure that permit holders make information about site safety training requirements available, and that the information be available in each of the designated citywide languages and any other languages required by the Department of Buildings. As the construction boom continues, we must take every step to maximize safety. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the Department of Buildings and Commissioner Melanie LaRocca for their laser focus on improving construction safety. They've been a great partner in this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
It's very heavy.
That's the backup sound.
Oh. Next, the Council will be voting on a bill to ban flavored e-cigarettes. I am really proud that we are voting on this today, as we've seen a reluctance on the part of the White House to create a ban on these flavors, and the state executive order is currently being challenged in court. New York City cannot wait any longer for this ban. We are taking action today to tell the industry to back off. Our children who are vaping in large part because they are lured by these flavors. We need to protect them from flavored e-cigarettes, and we're going to be voting on introduction number 1362A, sponsored by our Health Committee Chair Mark Levine, who has worked really hard on this and been such a champion. It would ban the sale of flavored e-cigarettes and flavored e-liquids in New York City, including mint, menthol, wintergreen e-cigarettes, and e-liquids. The legislation would also create a presumption that any electronic cigarette retail dealer in possession of 6 or more flavored e-cigarettes or more than 12 fluid ounces of e-liquids has the intent to sell or offer them for sale. This bill would also require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to conduct a public information and awareness campaign to educate the public regarding the availability of smoking cessation services. This ban will go into effect on the first day of the month succeeding the 180th day after the bill becomes law. And I invite Mark to come up and speak on this really important bill. Congratulations.
Thank you, Speaker. You have personally been amazing in this fight, and you were early and clear and public about your commitment to helping kids in this way. I'm really grateful for that. Unfortunately, we are acting now after our nation has been woefully slow in responding to the teen vaping epidemic, a failure that I really consider to be epic. This country did nothing as these sleek new devices with intense doses of nicotine came to the market. We did nothing when shelves started to fill up with vaping products in every flavor you can imagine, every fruity, minty, dessert-sounding, candy-sounding flavor that clearly appeals to kids. This country did nothing when Juul and other companies started to market their products on social media with stylish young people promoting juuling as a cool lifestyle choice. We did nothing when Big Tobacco started pumping billions into the vaping industry. We did nothing when middle schoolers started to report that they refused to go to the bathroom in their school because they knew that so many of their peers would be vaping there. And as a result of this inaction, today, 5 million teens in America are vaping. And in New York City, as elsewhere, the estimate is that 1 in 4 high school students and 1 in 10 middle schoolers has vaped in the past year. These are children who face now a potentially lifetime battle with nicotine addiction. Now, this failure has been national, and there's no more grotesque example of that than the Trump administration, which after weeks of some very nice rhetoric, succumbed to the pressure of tobacco industry lobbyists and right-wing political consultants and did a total 180, which some of you saw in a really, frankly, disgusting press event last week. We clearly cannot rely on them for action. I am so proud that New York City has not given in to that pressure, that we are acting to save our kids by banning the e-cigarette flavors that have been hooking them for years. Now, I want to acknowledge that we have listened intently to adults who have told us that they use e-cigarettes to quit smoking, and that's in part why we will continue to allow the sale of the vaping devices and tobacco-flavored liquids. But make no mistake, our highest priority is protecting the health of kids. And while only about 3% of adults vape, as I mentioned, it's about 25% in high schoolers. So this is predominantly a crisis of young people, and I am so proud to say that today we are acting as a city to protect their health. Upstairs, I'm going to thank the staff more fully. They've just been phenomenal. But Zay, Sarah, Emily, Lauren have just done incredible work on this. I'm grateful to them, to my colleagues, now 30 strong, who've co-sponsored the bill, and especially to you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Congratulations. Next, we are voting on a package of bills related to placard abuse. And we're going to crack down on placard abuse throughout the city. We've talked a lot about how to fix our streets lately, but even good design doesn't work if people simply don't follow the law. Neighborhoods across the city are plagued with cars that park with impunity, blocking sidewalks, in bike lanes, in front of hydrants, double parking. Some are abusing their city-issued placard. Others try to get away with it by putting a vest or notebook with a city logo on their dashboard, hoping that traffic agents look the other way. Placard abuse is corruption, and no driver has the right to take away space from pedestrians, cyclists, and bus riders. We've tolerated it for years as one of those unchangeable facts of life in New York City, but those days are hopefully over. The first bill is introduction number 942A, sponsored by Councilmember Peter Koo, which would require the city to develop a comprehensive citywide plan for the distribution and use of city-issued parking permits, and I invite Peter to come up and speak on this bill.
Now I look taller. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
You're welcome for that. And the bill.
Parker abuse is a big problem on our city streets, in which many now believe their parkers are a right they are entitled to, rather than a privilege to be used under very specific circumstances. Parker abuse not only clogs our streets with illegally parked vehicles. It also creates resentment and distrust in those authorities allowed to use the parkers. My bill is Intro 942A. This legislation looks to develop a comprehensive plan regarding the distributions and use of city-issued parking permits. Importantly, this bill will also publish this plan so that we can bring more transparency and accountability to the parker system. We want to curb the parker abuse, give our streets back to the public, and restore the public's trust in those who actually lead parking parkers to serve the city of New York. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you. Next is introduction, it's okay, 932A, sponsored by Councilmember Margaret Chin, which would require city-issued parking permits to be revoked from individuals who abuse their permits or fail to pay parking tickets. And I invite Margaret to come up and speak on this bill.
Thank you, Speaker. Now everybody can see my face. Today, we are urging the city to take placard abuse seriously. It's not only a sign of disrespect to residential communities that are taken over by placard abusers who don't care about the dangerous condition they create when they don't follow traffic rules. It's corruption, plain and simple. We cannot allow the status quo to continue if we are serious about safety on our street. I am proud to sponsor Intro 932, which will put a 3-strike rule on the books that lead to the immediate and permanent revocation of a placard. And I'm proud to be part of a package of legislation with Speaker Johnson and my colleagues to fight for stronger and smarter enforcement measures. Placard corruption has only added to the mistrust between the government and the community. And today, we are taking the necessary step for New Yorkers to get their streets back. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Walter. That's heavy. Next is introduction number 314A, sponsored by our Transportation Committee Chair, Adonis Rodriguez, which would require the police department to issue periodic reports on the number of summonses issued in connection with the improper use of city-issued parking permits. The next bill is introduction 1422A, sponsored by Councilmember Keith Powers, which would create a standardized application process for city-issued parking permits. And I invite Keith to come and speak on this bill.
I wish you kept the thing. I could feel like Robert Carnegie today, you know? Thank you. I'm really excited to be here passing legislation as part of the placard abuse, placard transparency, whatever you want to call it, package, which has gotten out of hand in New York City, contributing to congested streets and leading to public mistrust. My district, representing the East Side, Manhattan, and Midtown, is one that we frequently hear complaints about placard abuse, and I think Manhattan's the leading in terms of boroughs that gets complaints. We have seen placard issuances doubled over the last decade, from 67,000 to 125,000, according to city records and reporting that's been done on the topic. My application is one of the, I think, key components of this, which is to create a standardized application process for issuing placards and providing transparency about those who will be receiving placards. The Department of Transportation, Police Department, Department of Education, at DOT's request, will be able to give out permits as they do today, but they'll have to provide more details to us as a city why they need the placard in the first place, and they need to be sponsored by a city agency. It will clean up this process and give us better transparency into it. It's going to provide, I think, much needed clarity to parking here in New York City and provide the public with the information about how many permits are being requested, issued, and why. As the city is thinking about, rethinking about how we get around around here in the city, as the speaker said, it's not just about street redesign, it's also about public confidence, public trust about these public spaces, and managing these permits is one good step in that process. So I want to thank you to Speaker Johnson for pushing this placard package forward. Thank you to my colleagues for their support on it, and I'm looking forward to its passage today. Thank you.
We also have a bill being sponsored by the Public Advocate, Introduction 596B, sponsored by Public Advocate Williams, would increase the existing fine for unauthorized or fraudulent city-issued parking permits from $250 to $500. And finally, I have sponsored three pieces of legislation that get to the root of this issue. Councilmember Chin and Torres are also co-prime sponsors on these bills. Introduction 1393A would require the police department to evaluate at least 50 sites a week for a period of 6 months for illegal parking. The sites would be selected based on a review of complaints and summonses related to the misuse of parking permits and obstruction of bike lanes, bus lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, fire hydrants by a vehicle, as well as traffic crashes and moving violations. The NYPD would document their enforcement efforts with photographs. This work would be reviewed by the Department of Investigation as part of a new investigation into the issuance of parking permits and enforcement of parking laws. Introduction 1394A would prohibit official city vehicles from blocking bike lanes, bus lanes, crosswalks, sidewalks, or fire hydrants, making it the city's official policy. Introduction 1395A would require 311 to accept complaints and photographs related to illegal parking and the misuse of parking permits. Currently, 311 only offers limited ability to specify the type of illegal parking and does not accept photographs for any parking complaints. And you have to specify that a vehicle is an official city vehicle. And I want to thank Margaret for her co-sponsoring of these bills. And finally, one more bill, Introduction 927A, would require the police department to create a centralized electronic tracking system for all city-issued parking permits. The system would record all summonses issued and would allow the police department to verify in real time the validity of the permits. And with that, we're happy to take any on-topic questions first. Katie.
I wanted to ask about the placard of these bills. I know the issue when people are out on the street and they observe it, it's not so much the city-issued placards, it's just the lack of enforcement. You could put like a picture of Jimmy O'Neill on your dashboard and like a PBA card from 1995 and you won't get a ticket. So is there a plan to work on what seems to be a lack of enforcement with anything police adjacent in a vehicle?
So that is why we put into the bill the requirement that they're going to actually have to photograph their enforcement measures, and then that information will be turned over to the Department of Investigation, who will audit and oversee to make sure that they're actually doing real enforcement and they're actually issuing summonses. We wanted an outside check because the issue that we've heard is that the TEAs, the traffic enforcement agents who are supposed to be writing the summonses and the tickets for placard abuse, don't always do it because they're afraid of policing the police, because they're sort of quasi-police officers, NYPD personnel in some way. And that is why we put in the DOI check, so that there would be an independent overseer of that because of the issue that you just mentioned.
And just as a follow-up, in February, the mayor announced his own sort of crackdown on this, I guess introducing DOT police because of the concern of policing the police. How do these two plans work?
He announced his plan after we had our hearing, after our hearing was praised by advocates, after his efforts had been panned by advocates. So I'm glad that they worked with us on this package of bills, and this is the package of bills that are going into law today. Yoav?
Two kind of related questions. One is, he did announce a crackdown in February. It was the second one that he's announced. And now you're introducing a very robust package of bills. What does that say about, the mayor's plan? Are you saying it's insufficient? Do you have any idea if what the administration has been doing has had any impact?
I think some of the reforms that they announced were good reforms in February, and I'm grateful that they announced those reforms. But, we are very flattered that they came around to support this package of legislation because ultimately this is what is going to be codified into the administrative law of New York City. This is the package of bills we've been negotiating. This is the package of bills that we had hearings on. They announced their reforms separate and apart from the City Council, and then we worked with them on this package of bills. So I'm glad that they worked with us on this, but I think that what we think is going to show success is this package of bills if it is enforced and ministered correctly, and that is what the NYPD, the traffic enforcement agents, and DOI needs to do once these bills become law. Yeah. Yep.
One of the criticisms of the mayor's February plan was the three strikes rule, allowing people to have multiple offenses before any action was taken. And one of the components of Councilmember Chin's bill is three strikes. This is a perk. This is a privilege. Why are we being so lenient when it comes to enforcement?
Well, I do not want to in any way compare placard abuse to, the three strikes laws that we've seen across the country that create harsh penalties for people. But I do think that we want to be case specific when we are actually putting penalties in place. And I'll let Margaret speak on her bill that does this, but I would say that, when we write bills, we want to create some level of flexibility because who knows what happened in that individual instance. Did someone have a potential health emergency, which is why they were parked there? There could be reasons why someone does this. Again, you see this package of bills as us coming down hard on saying we do not want placard abuse to persist and proliferate in New York City, but I think we're trying to find some level of flexibility because what we think is actually happening is that most of the severe placard abuse that we see across the city are people that are doing this way more than 3 times. And that's what we really want to come down on, the persistent abusers of either fake placards or city placards that don't allow them to park in the places that they're parking. Margaret, did you want to say anything?
Well, I think you can give them a ticket, right? But if they do it again and again and again, so my bill is that 3 times, you're out. You're going to lose that privilege, and you're going to get that permit taken away.
Let me just go to Vin.
So kind of a two-part question. I guess, the city, when they testified, they said that your bill is similar to what they're doing in terms of digitizing, creating a digital tracking system. Can you clarify how it's different? And then my second question is, are we kind of just dancing around the issue of too many placards? Would you look into just reducing the number as we moved over this?
So Kelly, jump in if I get this wrong. Kelly Taylor is my counsel who worked on this package of bills. It's my understanding that Councilmember Ku's bill sets up basically a time horizon to come back and actually look at the total number of parking placards that are issued in New York City and to understand if there are too many potential placards. And there's a set period in the bill to actually come back, to have a process in place where the city actually looks at the overall number of parking placards and determines if that is too many, and they could come back to us and say there are too many placards and then formulate a plan on how to reduce the number of placards. Did I get that right? 2020. And then on the first part, I don't know the specifics. I'm happy to follow up with you on how their registry differs from our registry. But again, the package of bills that we're voting on today, we feel very confident in. Joe?
Some people have expressed, some criticism that you're not passing a ban on menthol cigarettes along with e-cigarettes. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of why the distinction you draw between the two and some of the voices you listen to in not bringing that?
So I have concerns about menthol cigarettes, and I am not opposed to us actually banning them. The concern that I have is a criminal justice-related concern. There were meetings that took place with the NYPD who said, hopefully I'm going to get this right, jump in if I get this wrong. Jeff Baker's here, hopefully. That on the 3rd summons, warrant would be issued if someone was selling loose cigarettes. And we think that there there could potentially be an underground market of menthol cigarettes that could exist if you put this ban in place. And given the Garner incident, given other incidents that we've seen across the city, I have concerns. So we are actually looking on a sort of criminal justice element to this. Is there a way for us to figure out with the NYPD and with the sheriff and with people that do this level of enforcement, a way so that you wouldn't actually potentially have that type of incident take place if there was that underground market that existed if we banned menthol cigarettes? I support us getting rid of nicotine products in the way we can, which is why you see Councilmember Levine's bill today passing. But I didn't want to hold Councilmember Levine's bill hostage to this other bill where I think there are legitimate concerns. And I know that some of the advocates are disappointed because they saw these bills as being coupled together, Councilmember Levine's bill and Councilmember Cabrera's bill, and we weren't able to figure out the issues around Councilmember Cabrera's bill by the stated meeting today or by the aging deadline that we previously had. And I didn't want to continue to hold up Councilmember Levine's bill, given that the state legislature is coming back into session in January. And I think that we should be the ones legislating this, not leaving it up to the state legislature. And that is why we moved. But I want to let Mark speak on this as well, if you want to.
Sure. The vaping bill itself went through a more than a 1-year process of vetting and public dialogue. And we got to the point where we feel like we've gotten it right, we've got the balance right, and there's no way to justify holding up our bill, 1362, given that the stakes are high and kids every day are falling into this addiction. And I think the speaker put it very powerfully that we want to curtail nicotine addiction from all sources, including from traditional cigarettes. But unlike with vaping, there are some legitimate criminal justice questions which have to be answered. There's a lot of stakeholders that have to be consulted in that. And that process is ongoing, but not quite across the finish line yet. So we're celebrating a big victory today, while work continues behind the scenes on the other bill.
Are you worried that usually you couple bills together to create sort of momentum? Are you worried that you'll lose that now that they aren't tied?
There's no doubt that a great coalition came together of parents and public health advocates and civil rights advocates around both bills. That coalition is certainly celebrating today as we're about to pass this really landmark legislation on e-cigarettes. But I think that coalition is going to continue to work and to advocate as well they should. I don't think the public effort to curtail smoking of menthol is going to stop. But meanwhile, important work is being done behind the scenes.
Are you concerned that a similar black market will exist with, or will be created with ban of flavor vaping? Can you talk about what the penalties are?
It's possible, but for reasons I'll explain, I don't think likely. But the penalties are on those who sell, not on possession or use. The penalties, I guess, start at about $1,000 and escalate based on repeat violation. I am more concerned that people will turn to the internet to obtain flavored vaping products. That's always kind of been part of the culture of this. It's always been sort of a tech product. For that, we need federal action. We can't stop interstate commerce, and it's why, despite the reprehensible refusal to act at the FDA now, we're going to continue to push them. But we'll be sensitive to enforcement questions there as well, but I think it's a very different product, a different usage community, and a different culture around purchasing.
What does the ban take effect?
It takes effect, we think it's going to take effect, our projection is on July 1st. That's when it looks like it's going to take effect. Gloria?
The folks who are supportive of the menthol cigarette ban say that the argument about the creation of this underground market isn't valid because there is already an underground market and it's for cigarettes, that you can buy a cheaper carton for what you can buy it at a store when you have to pay by cash. So, can you just respond to that? They say that this, it's basically an excuse, and that the damage that people who have smoked these products for so many years is greater than this excuse about police interaction.
Look, I smoked over a pack a day for 10 years. I started smoking when I quit drinking and using drugs. When I got sober in July of 2009 is when I started using nicotine in a big way. I smoked more than a pack of Parliament 100s a day for over 10 years. My father, who raised me, died of lung cancer and smoked 2 packs of Winston's every day, and he died of lung cancer in the summer of 2012. My mother smoked my entire life until she quit 2 years ago, and my message is that no one should ever start smoking. I wish I never started smoking. I wish my family never started smoking, and I think that we've seen the really horrific effects of cigarettes and the way cigarettes are marketed to young people and the way they were marketed many, many years ago, decades ago to be a cool thing. And I think maybe part of the reason that I picked up smoking is because my parents smoked. And that there was that issue at stake. On that, I'm not sure I fully understand it, and the reason why is there's a difference between if you fully ban a type of product versus products that you could still potentially go buy cheaper. And this, if we pass this bill, which I'm still open to doing, if we figure out the criminal justice element, you would fully ban menthol cigarettes. And that would potentially create a black market of people trucking cigarettes into New York City, selling them either illegally at cigarette retailers across the city, basically off the books, or on the sidewalks through loose cigarettes in neighborhoods where there's more predominant use of menthol cigarettes. And that is the concern that we have. I think the city's actually been successful over the last basically 15 years at bringing smoking down. There's been a slight uptick in it. And that has been through a public awareness campaign, smoking cessation campaigns, us doing all of that. We should continue to do that work, but I still have this concern because, you know, in some ways, all cigarettes are bad. Why aren't we banning all cigarettes? You know, and I know the menthols basically addict people because of the flavor. They're predominantly, not exclusively, used by African Americans. And given what we saw with the Garner incident, I still have concerns. So if we're able to figure that out, I'm happy to move forward, and we're going to continue to work every single day to try to figure that out.
But you are banning this other one, so.
Because Councilmember Levine just talked about, I think, the difference between the two, which is the culture, the usage, the demographic. We don't think that, and the history around them. I mean, these are basically newer products. Menthol cigarettes have been around for decades. So we think that there is a difference between e-cigarettes and the jewel packs and pods and similar competitors that sell those products to traditional menthol cigarettes, which have been around a very, very long time. Well, I actually use mint pods, mint jewel pods, and again, my message is I wish I never started smoking, and I hopefully will be on the road to being totally nicotine-free. I would say that these mint pods actually have been helpful in me not picking up a cigarette, but I think this is the most important part of this. Just because it's been helpful to me, just because it's been helpful to other adults that have struggled with quitting, there are other things that we could potentially do that could help us. And the overwhelming issue here is the issue of children, that these products are addicting children, and children, what the research shows, who use vaping then actually go into cigarette use, and it addicts them on cigarettes. For adults, it's typically going from cigarettes to vaping. For children, it's vaping to cigarettes. And that is what we need to keep at the forefront of our minds here. It's protecting children. So when you ask me, you know, is it going to be difficult for me? Potentially. But what is way more important is us protecting the thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of kids that have been marketed to, that have been vaping, and that could get addicted to cigarettes. No, I mean, I'm going to have to either use the tobacco flavored, which would still be allowed, or I'm going to have to finally quit all nicotine use You heard Margaret yell quit.
Acupuncture.
I'm going to go to acupuncture with Margaret. That's the plan. Rich.
I get that you obviously don't want to create a environment situation created, but when you say you want to figure out the criminal justice element, so let me clarify what you mean. I mean, the law, and the law just passed, it still have to be enforced. So what personally did you like to see?
Which what? I didn't hear we say, Rich.
On the menthol
Yeah.
cigarettes.
I just didn't hear the last part.
Personally, would you
What
like to see?
personally would you like to see as enforcement? You must have some ideas.
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I would say that, I think we have successfully in the city council and in the city of New York moved away from over-criminalizing all sorts of different issues across New York City, and crime has remained low across the board. There have been some slight upticks in shootings, and of course, sexual assault has remained high. But when we have decriminalized some of these things, you haven't seen the sky fall in New York City, and I think that has been a real success. Some of this, there's the interaction with state law. Some of it is us having to work with the NYPD and how they enforce certain things. Some of this is in response to community complaints that are made when people are potentially selling illegal cigarettes, untaxed cigarettes, loose cigarettes, those type of things. So we have to strike that balance. But the concern here is that menthol cigarettes are, again, predominantly used by the African American community, and we've seen a variety of incidents of an escalation when police officers potentially come and crack down on what the existing law is, and those things escalate. I think there could be more of that if we pass this bill as is without looking at other potential criminal justice fixes. And I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. That's what we're talking to the NYPD about. It's not about what I personally think it should be. It's about talking to the experts, talking to the DAs, talking to the NYPD, looking at state law, understanding where we can strike that balance. And that's what I hope to do in these conversations moving forward.
Are you looking for some sort of guarantee from the NYPD that, hey, we're not going to arrest someone if they're caught?
No, I wouldn't say that. It's about actually understanding what the current practices are, and if this went into effect, what it could potentially look like to us for us to try to avoid a situation like that. Henry.
It's already illegal to sell these vape products to kids in New York City.
Yes.
And around the state. This bill would make it illegal to sell to anyone in the city. But what's to prevent a kid or someone who wants to sell this stuff illegally to go beyond city lines, buy stuff in bulk, bring it back, and sell it to the same market that they already have?
Mark, do you want to take this?
Already an illegal sale.
Well, we have to emphasize that the age restriction has not worked in keeping this out of the hands of kids, primarily because people over 21, whether they're siblings or friends of children, are going in and buying and passing them on. And also because they're merchants who are not conducting adequate age verification. This will not stop every kid who's determined to get flavored e-cigarettes from doing so. It'll make it a lot tougher. It'll remove the temptation of walking into the stores that kids are walking into every day, every bodega and deli that they're going into to get a bag of chips or a soda, from seeing these products on display with colorful packaging, often featuring cartoon characters with very alluring flavors like watermelon twist and chocolate mint. We're going to remove that temptation. We're going to remove the easy availability. This will probably not be the end of any child vaping in New York City, but I'm confident it will reduce the prevalence of vaping. To go the whole way, we're ultimately going to need state and national action, particularly to deal with what I predict will be the biggest problem, online sales, and we're going to continue that fight. But how could we justify not acting in this way to protect kids with the powers that we have? This will do a lot of good for a lot of kids, but our work will continue.
We can open it up for any type of question. But, oh yeah, sorry, yes.
The state has tried
Yes.
How will this be different, or do you think this will be different?
Mark, do you want to?
Well, the governor, to his credit, attempted to do this via executive action. This was not legislation. And the court struck it down based on a technical argument about whether there was adequate authority. We don't have that challenge here. We certainly have the power to legislate in this area. We've done it many times over decades. Maybe there'll be a legal challenge. I'm sure the vaping industry will try and think of some creative strategy, but we are really confident that New York City has the power to legislate what's sold on the shelves here. Again, we've done it in the past. This is legislation, not executive action, so I have every confidence that this will survive legal challenge.
Sean.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Councilman Andy King.
Yes.
Whose suspension ends this week.
Yes.
Now that he's going to be coming back, what will be your message to him, to other council members, and especially to those of the city council staff who wanted him fired instead of suspended?
Well, I mean, I have talked about this a lot previously, and I've condemned in the harshest terms what Councilmember King did, and you saw the harshest penalty that the New York City Council has ever given to a member here. And I believe the investigation was handled properly by an outside independent prosecutor, Carrie Cohen, who prosecuted Shelley Silver and Alan Hevesy. And we took that step because of how serious we found this. And we immediately moved to protect the employees as soon as we found out who were suffering harassment or being retaliated against when Councilmember King found out that they were complying and participating and cooperating in our investigation here at the council. And so I think the message to him is that he needs to act professionally and that we are watching, that we expect conduct that befits an elected official, and if he strays from that, you are going to see severe action against him. So that is what I would say to him. And again, I just want to say to all the members here, all the staff here, we hear you. We want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to protect you. I know that we are not perfect. I know that we can do better. We sent an email out from myself on Friday on 2 issues. One email related to the unionization issue here at the City Council and letting people know what the rules are and how they need to conduct themselves while this organizing is going on. Again, I support the staff members' efforts in unionizing. And another email responding to that open letter that came up a few weeks ago, again, detailing what we perceive, what we know to be the rules here at the City Council, how people have to conduct themselves, what the penalties and what the measures of recourse are if someone feels like they are being harassed or retaliated against or discriminated against. We want that reported right away so that we can take action against another staff member or against a council member that is conducting themselves that way. So that is what my message would be, and we're going to continue to uphold this in the strictest way moving forward.
The sexual harassment working group is holding a rally this afternoon. Have you or your office been communicating with that group? Do you have any thoughts on what they've been doing?
Jim, have you been in touch with them?
No. We've been aware, and in one respect, that the letter is meant to address that. The letter that the speaker sent out also invited people to express concerns, make suggestions, and is essentially an effort to continue working with all staff on these issues.
So Jim Karras is the general counsel here at the City Council. I have not been in touch with them, but I'm grateful for the work that they've done on this and the work that they did in Albany. I think that their voices are really important, that they matter, that they should be lifted up. And so we will continue the conversation to actually figure out what else we can be doing here at the council, I want to just reiterate a few things. Number one, we entered into a contract with Redwood Enterprises earlier this year before the King incident became what it ultimately ended up being, where we knew all the facts. Before we knew all the facts, we entered into a contract with them to audit the practices here at the City Council, to interview council members and staff, to understand where we're doing things right, but potentially where there are deficiencies and weaknesses. And that audit is ongoing. We did that proactively. We brought in the General Counsel's Office does annual sexual harassment, ethics, non-discrimination trainings for the council members here. We did that, but we also brought in an outside organization that does that type of work separate from the General Counsel's Office, so there's a level of independence, where they conducted a training with all the council members as well. We changed our sexual harassment policies last year and strengthened them, which I'm proud of. And on some of the workplace and culture issues that exist here at the council, I want to know what we can do better. You know, when I came in, one of the first things I did in February of 2018 is I upped the city council's budget significantly. And the reason why I did that is so that I could give increases to staff members here because I felt like they weren't being paid fairly and adequately, and that we didn't have the highest level of retention, where other city agencies and the mayor's office were actually able to take some of the incredibly talented staff here because they could offer them more money. And we offered significant raises almost across the board for the central staff here. We at the same time strengthened our maternity and paternity leave policies. I believe the city council has the best maternity and paternity leave policies in the entire city right now. I did that in my first 6 months as being speaker. So I'm proud of all of these things that we have done pre-Andy King. But if there is more that we can do to make it a better work environment for the incredible people who work here at the City Council, I am always open to figuring out what those things are. Gloria.
I guess I just want to know what you think of council staffers. You know, you are having a stated meeting. It's the day where the council is doing its public work. They're going to be out there rallying in the middle of the day, I guess the work day. What do you make of that?
I support them. I think their voices should be heard. I think it's important that we listen to them. I think it's important for us to be explicit in saying that we are not perfect and that we value them, and that anything we can do to actually improve things here, we want to hear that, take that in, and potentially make those changes. So that is what I'm committed to doing. I think I've showed my track record on this the last 2 years as speaker. I'm proud of all of the work that I just outlined in the previous question, and I have no issue whatsoever with the staff here making their voices heard, standing up, and speaking out on what they think needs to be done to actually make this an even better place to work. Yes. Yes.
Two things. One, why do you think that office is needed when the mayor says he's doing a good job? And also, why would there be two offices and not just one?
Honestly, I don't know enough about it. I have been so deeply involved in the placard stuff and the master plan stuff and trying to get the Reckless Driver Accountability Act to a good place that I haven't really been focused on that bill. I know that there was a press conference today on the steps of City Hall with Council Members Rivera and Rodriguez. I literally have not had a single conversation about this bill with the staff or with those members. I'm happy to do so and to understand a little bit more where things stand and why the bill has been drafted a certain way. You've seen my record, you've seen this council's record on safe streets, on pushing transportation policy forward, on trying to make this a safer city, on pushing the envelope in some ways and going further than the other side of City Hall. So if that bill does that, it's something that I would, be potentially supportive of, but I need to understand the bill a little bit more, and I haven't done that yet. So I don't want to preempt my ability to be educated by the staff here and have conversations with the council members. Yeah. We're working on it every week. We've had weekly meetings with the other side of City Hall, with the law department, and looking at legal issues that we have been working through. Councilmember Lander has been great. The advocates have been great. We've been working with Families for Safe Streets and Transportation Alternatives. It's been an inclusive, iterative process. I feel good about the direction that it's going, but you know, we've been doing a lot. We did the master plan bill, we did the placard package bill, we're working on this bill, and I feel like eventually we'll get to a good place, but we've been having weekly meetings around this, and Kelly Taylor, my counsel, has been sort of leading the effort on our side with Councilmember Lander, but I feel like we're heading in a good direction. Rich.
It's costing $12 million for the federal monitor at Nycc. That Mark Schwartz's salary is $150,000 alone, and that's on top of the $403,000 that's being paid to this chairperson. Can you justify the type of spending when there's so many Nycc departments that don't have to be made for lead?
I haven't seen the details. I saw the story that came out earlier today on that. I believe Nolan had a story on this, and I was happy to read it, but I'm not remembering all the facts in the story. I would just say those initial numbers, it seems like way too much money. You know, that's a huge salary, and again, we need every dollar we can to go towards critical repairs, deteriorating housing stock. You see already the heating outages that Nycc residents experienced just a couple of weeks ago. We had some really cold days, and that's where I think we need to be maximizing money. I do think the monitor plays an important role, and this was put in via a consent decree and a settlement with HUD, so that's important, but the amount of money for this amount of time seems like way too much money at this point.
Last question?
Shant.
What do you think of Bloomberg for president?
I have made no endorsement. I've met with Senator Harris and Senator Warren and Mayor Buttigieg, but I have made no endorsement, and I look forward to potentially making an endorsement down the road, but I just want to beat Donald Trump. I want to beat this authoritarian criminal who is in the White House that brings shame to New York City every single day and is literally tearing our country apart and destabilizing the entire world. I am glad that we see these impeachment proceedings, and I look forward to continuing to follow the race on the Democratic side intently, but I have made no endorsements, and I'm not close to making an endorsement.
Mayor de Blasio hasn't missed an opportunity to bash his predecessor. Do you think that's ungracious? Do you have any thoughts on that?
There are things that I could stand up here today to criticize Mayor Bloomberg. There are things that I could do today to criticize Mayor de Blasio. The things that I could do to criticize anyone in elected office. People can criticize me because I've made mistakes as well. But I do think that it is important to, you have not seen me criticize Speaker Mark Viverito. And you have not seen Speaker Mark Viverito criticize me. And you have not seen me criticize Speaker Quinn, and you have not seen Speaker Quinn criticize me. There, I think, is typically a level of graciousness that occurs. Now, that may change when someone decides they're running for president, but also when Mayor de Blasio was running for president, I didn't see Mayor Bloomberg criticizing him. So I do think that there are totally fair criticisms, especially on stop, question, and frisk, and you saw Mayor Bloomberg apologize for that, though I think a lot more needs to be done than just an apology. But again, I think a level of graciousness is important here.
Mr. Speaker, on the placards, I just want to ask, I had a conversation with the chair of the Transportation Committee on reducing the actual number of placards. Is that something you're open to, reducing the total number of placards, NYPD, DOT issue?
Yeah, before you walked in, Dan, I had mentioned that one of the bills by Councilmember Koo puts a process in place that by 2020, we're going to be looking at the total number of placards that are issued in the city of New York, and we will look at that and understand if that is too many placards, agency by agency, understanding sort of the total number that are actually needed, and then potentially making recommendations going forward. So I don't want to preempt that process that is in Councilmember Koo's bill.
You're saying the mayor isn't being gracious?
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.